The boutique was a cathedral of luxury. Marble floors gleamed like still water under the soft shimmer of crystal chandeliers. Glass cases lined the walls, each one cradling a Zevano timepiece. Watches so pristine they seemed to hold not just time, but power. These were more than accessories. They were declarations, symbols of achievement, of status, of belonging. And yet, but beneath the flawless glass and polished gold, something was festering. The door swung open with a quiet chime, drawing eyes like magnets. A man stepped inside, wearing a faded gray hoodie and worn-out boots that had walked through harder days. He didn't fit. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in this shrine to wealth. Shoppers murmured behind manicured hands, their voices a crackling static of judgment and suspicion. And then, just loud enough to cut through the ambient jazz and curated silence, came the whisper, "Make sure he gets the fake. We'll ship the original to Houston with the rest." The words hung in the air like a venomous mist. The man froze. He hadn't even taken 3 full steps into the store, but already he felt the atmosphere change. It wasn't just discomfort. It was betrayal. That whisper wasn't meant for him, but it reached him all the same. What they didn't know was that he wasn't just another lost soul wandering into the wrong place. He was the architect of it all. Miguel Santiago, 58th, Latino, quiet-spoken yet deeply principled, was the founder of Zevano watches. To strangers, he might have looked like just another aging man trying to reclaim relevance, but behind those weathered eyes were decades of sacrifice, vision, and grit. His hands, though now softened by time, still bore the faint scars from a different era, etched reminders of the long nights spent in a dusty El Paso workshop, where he forged his dream with sweat and solder. Zevano didn't begin in boardrooms or luxury towers. It was born in the back room of a 2-bedroom house on the edge of the desert, born from his father's calloused fingers teaching him how to sand brass and polish glass with patience and pride, born from the hunger of a young man who gave up weekends, birthdays, and even hot meals for the sake of something bigger than himself. He named the brand after his mother's hometown, Zevano, Bolivia, a tribute to the people who raised him to live with honor, not opulence. Every tick of a Zevano watch was meant to echo that truth. It wasn't just about telling time, it was about remembering where you came from and never forgetting who helped you rise. And for a time it worked. Zevano became a name. One watch became 10, then hundreds, then thousands. Words spread, celebrities wore them, awards came. And Miguel, he was celebrated as a visionary, a dreamer who'd made it. But with success came something more dangerous than failure. Distance. He stepped back. He trusted others to protect what he'd built, to carry the flame of his values. But fires, when left unattended, don't just fade. Sometimes they burn everything. Then came the letter. An email, written with polite restraint but laced with pain, from a retired engineer, a man Miguel remembered meeting at a product launch years ago. Back then the man had wept, thanking Miguel for the watch he wore to his daughter's wedding. But now, his words were different. "They sold me a Zevano," had it appraised. "It's a replica. I trusted your brand." "I trusted you." Miguel read it once, then again, and again. With each pass, his heart sank deeper. This wasn't just a complaint. It was a crack in the foundation he had built with blood and belief. That single message turned into a haunting spiral. He dove into forums, scoured records, read reviews like they were autopsies. Inconsistencies, counterfeits, customers gaslit by managers, whispers of corruption, whispers everywhere. Odder, whispers of corruption, whispers everywhere. That's when he made the hardest choice of his life. He took off the tailored suit, left the corner office with its skyline view, and put on the same hoodie he wore during the days when Zevano was still just a sketch in his notebook. No press release. No camera crew. Just a man walking back into the world he created to see if it was still his, or if it had become something unrecognizable. Not as a CEO, but as a father checking if his child had lost its way. Before he even reached the counter, he heard it again, that sharp edge slicing through the store's polished illusion. A woman in her early 30s stood near the exit, her hands trembling slightly as they clutched a white gift box close to her chest. Her coat, once elegant, now seemed to sag with invisible weight. Something wasn't right. And Miguel, standing there in his old boots and hoodie, suddenly understood. This wasn't just a failing brand. It was a home on fire. Her voice was a fragile thread, quivering as she fought to keep it from unraveling completely. "I bought this watch for my dad's retirement," she said, blinking rapidly, as if sheer willpower could hold back the flood. It was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to be special. With trembling fingers, she opened the box. The watch lay inside like a silent betrayal. "It's plastic," she whispered. "The appraisal says it's fake." Her eyes, wide, searching, almost pleading, locked with the woman behind the counter. But Tanya barely looked up. Late 40s, hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, gold jewelry weighing down her neckline like medals of apathy. She adjusted the cuff of her designer blazer with calculated poise, as if this woman's heartbreak were an interruption to her curated image of luxury. "If it was purchased here," Tanya said with a saccharine tone that couldn't hide its mechanical coldness, "then it's authentic. Maybe your dad broke it. It happens." The woman gasped softly, almost like a child trying not to cry. "He's 72, she said. "He cried when I gave it to him." "Do you think he would have broken it on purpose?" Miguel felt something twist deep inside him, a sickening coil of shame, anger, and sorrow. His feet felt like they'd been fused to the marble floor, his hands tightening at his sides as if clenching memories instead of fists. Then came Victor. Young, eager, his hair stiff with gel and his smile stretched with the hunger of commission. He stepped in with a smug little chuckle, his voice needlessly loud, meant to dominate. "Ma'am," he said, drawing the word out like a taunt, "if you can't afford a real Zevano, maybe don't come in here accusing us. A knockoff bought online doesn't make us responsible." The room fell still. The woman's jaw dropped, her lips parting in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" Victor cocked a brow. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Tanya crossed her arms and sighed, already done with the conversation. "Unless you have the original receipt and warranty card, there's really nothing more we can do." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. She looked around at the glittering displays, the polished surfaces, the other customers who suddenly found immense interest in their phones or shoes. No one stepped in, no one cared. This palace of wealth had no room for empathy. She turned slowly, whispering under her breath as she walked away, "My dad saved for months. He wore it like it was gold." The door chimed softly as she disappeared into the street, taking her pain with her, but leaving her shame behind. Miguel remained frozen, the weight of everything pressing down on him like a collapsing roof. His breath caught in his chest. This wasn't just about one faulty strap or a dishonest sale. It was about dignity, trust, love expressed through sacrifice, and it had been shredded under fluorescent lights by people who didn't understand the soul of what he had built. He had shaped those watches with hands that had bled on metal and glass, each bezel polished with hope, each dial calibrated with dreams. Zevano wasn't meant to humiliate people. It was created to make them feel worthy, to remind them that beauty could be honest and heritage could be worn with pride. What he had just witnessed wasn't bad service. It was cruelty masquerading in luxury cologne. Miguel inhaled slowly, letting the moment bury itself deep within him. Then, with the calm of a storm gathering, he walked toward the counter. His eyes remained fixed on the door the woman had exited through, as though trying to follow her pain into the night. He didn't blink when Victor turned to him, chewing his gum and sizing him up like a thrift store browser. "Help you, sir?" Victor asked, already disinterested. Miguel nodded once. "Yes," he replied, voice steady, slow. "I'm looking for something special." He turned to the display case, letting his gaze linger on the watches, his watches, like a father searching for his child in a sea of strangers. And then he waited to see which lie they would try to dress in gold. Waited to see if they'd recognize the very heartbeat of the brand they were corrupting. Waited, most of all, to feel just how deep the betrayal went. Miguel leaned in slightly, tapping the display glass with gentle insistence. "Could I see the arc light chrono?" he asked, softly. Victor blinked, his smirk twitching with disbelief. He let out a dry chuckle, exchanging a look with Tanya. "The arc light?" he scoffed. "We don't usually bring that out unless someone's, serious." Miguel tilted his head slightly, a faint smile curling at the corner of his mouth, not of amusement, but of recognition. He had heard that tone before, long ago, from people who thought he'd never make it. "I'm serious," he said, his voice like flint striking steel. Victor scanned Miguel from head to toe with the smugness of a man who thought he knew everything worth knowing. The worn hoodie, the tired sneakers, the hands etched with time. No polished watch on his wrist, no designer labels, no scent of expensive cologne. Nothing about him whispered wealth or authority. Tanya approached, her heels tapping across the floor like judgment in motion. Her eyes narrowed, filled with an artificial curiosity laced with disdain. "Heard that hoodie mumble something earlier," she said, a smirk curling her lips. "All right, let's give him one of the display pieces. Let him touch the dream. See how it tastes." Victor gave a half nod and vanished into the back. Miguel stood still, the soft golden spotlight overhead casting him in ironic reverence. Around him, glass cases, glittering luxury, silence veiled in contempt. He felt Tanya's stare like a weight, pressing, evaluating, dismissing. In the corners, employees exchanged whispered jokes, watching the old man beneath the lights as if waiting for him to embarrass himself. Victor returned, carrying the arc-light chrono with overly careful hands. Like a man holding a Fabergé egg he didn't deserve to touch, he handed it to Miguel with theatrical grace. Miguel accepted it silently. To the untrained eye it was perfect. The silver bezel gleamed, the obsidian finish on the dial looked deep and rich, and the sapphire crystal caught the light like morning dew. But Miguel didn't just design watches. He breathed life into them. He knew every contour, every nuance, and what he held now was wrong. It was too light. The balance was off. The dial wasn't true black, it was navy. The clasp had a tinny click, brittle and hollow, and when he turned it over, no serial number, just a plain metal plate with a generic stamp. Like a ghost of the real thing. His chest tightened. "Do you have the certificate for this one?" he asked, his voice soft but certain. Tanya folded her arms and cocked her head. "Do you really need it?" she asked, voice laced with mockery. "You haven't even told us how you plan on paying." Miguel began to respond, but Victor cut in, his grin widening. "You want to finance it, over a few years?" His voice rose just enough for others to hear. "Or maybe just dream a little longer, before heading back to your shift?" Laughter rippled from the espresso bar, a smirk from behind the counter. Even the security guard chuckled lowly near the entrance. Miguel didn't flinch. But inside, something deep began to crack. He wasn't just the man who created this watch. He was the man who stayed up through freezing winters in a garage with no heat, sketching its design by candlelight while his wife slept, wrapped in blankets beside him. He had crossed oceans with only a suitcase, trying to convince Swiss engineers that a Latino craftsman from El Paso had something worth believing in. He had watched this very model, his arc light, worn by world leaders, movie stars, astronauts. And now, in the very boutique that bore his name, he was being mocked for touching a forgery of his own creation. Still, he said nothing, because this moment wasn't about ego. It was about the truth waiting in the shadows. He turned to leave. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum, but as he passed a tall pillar, two voices halted him. Two employees, laughing, careless, oblivious to his presence. Denver got their batch last week, one snickered. Darren, an inventory clerk, pulling out his phone. Houston's next. Keep the replicas flowing, baby. His companion, younger and jittery, replied with a laugh. They don't even check. They're all just chasing a logo. Half don't notice the cereal's missing. Miguel stopped walking. His body froze, but the truth hit him like a freight train. This wasn't random. It wasn't an isolated mistake. This was a system. Cities, Denver, Houston, and who knew how many more were receiving genuine Zevano masterpieces under the table, likely funneled to elite collectors or sold through back channels for inflated profits. Meanwhile, everyday customers, like the woman with her father's retirement gift, were handed fakes worth less than a tenth of what they paid. Miguel's knees buckled slightly. He pressed a hand against the cold marble pillar beside him, the stone grounding him as his heart cracked open with the weight of betrayal. This wasn't just corporate greed. This wasn't some backroom error. It was treason, not against him, but against the very soul of what Zevano was supposed to stand for. Craftsmanship, integrity, legacy. He looked up slowly, his vision blurring, not from tears, but from a rage sharpened by heartbreak. It was time. Not for a press release, not for a lawyer, but for the truth face to face. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He simply turned, walked back to the counter, and set the cheap replica gently down. The room stilled. Tanya adjusted her scarf, sensing something shift. Victor leaned lazily against the register, still basking in his cruel little performance. Miguel reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a black leather wallet. From it, he drew a sleek black ID card edged in silver. It shimmered under the lights as he slid it across the counter. Slowly, deliberately, Victor frowned, picked it up, scanned it once, then again. His jaw slackened. Tanya lunged forward, heels clacking, snatching the card from Victor's fingers. Her eyes darted, scanning the engraving. Founder and chairman, Zevano Global. Her breath caught. This is fake? She stammered. Right? This has to be some kind of... Miguel finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I carved the original Arclight chrono with my father's tools, he said, his tone low and unshakable, before we could even afford heat in the winter. Hannah blinked. I know every gear in that watch, every groove, every imperfection, because I designed it to outlive me. And today, you sold me a hollow lie in its place. He turned his gaze to Victor, voice tightening. And you mocked a woman for crying over her father's gift. You mocked me for not wearing a suit. You laughed while stealing my name. The store fell silent. Even the security guard, halfway to raising his radio, stood still. Miguel straightened his shoulders. The weight of decades didn't crush him. It shaped him, and the reckoning had only just begun. Behind him, silence swallowed the air as Miguel's voice sliced through the boutique like steel. This store is no longer under your control, he said, turning slowly, his gaze calm but commanding. You've sold counterfeits under my name. You've deceived loyal customers. You took something sacred and pawned it off like spare change." He pointed at the security guard. "Lock the doors. No one leaves." The guard hesitated, then nodded. "Call corporate," Miguel continued. "Call legal. Internal affairs is already on their way." Tanya stumbled backward, the poise evaporating from her frame. Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Please, Mr. Santiago, we did." Miguel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You didn't think I'd come." And with those words, the illusion shattered. Within 48 hours, Miguel transformed every connection, every favor, every ounce of capital he had built over decades into an unstoppable force. Internal auditors, compliance officers, third-party forensic experts, his silent army descended on the boutique. They came not with sirens, but with scanners, logs, and questions that pierced deeper than any alarm ever could. And Miguel, he didn't delegate. With his sleeves rolled up and jaw clenched, he sat at a folding table in the back room, reviewing shipments, invoices, serial logs by hand. His fingers, still calloused from decades of building dreams, trembled, not from age, but fury. He held 2 watches side by side. "This clasp is molded alloy," he whispered. "We used to use hand-forged stainless steel. This is garbage." Across the table, the lead auditor looked up, her face pale. "We found manipulated serial records tied to at least 8 boutiques," she said softly. "They're rerouting real inventory to off-site warehouses, selling replicas in-store." "How many?" "Just over 1,200 units. Market value, $8,400,000. 0 cents. Miguel exhaled through his nose like a man holding back a scream. He closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them, everything was clear. The next morning the storm broke. News trucks swarmed the flagship boutique. Federal agents, armed with warrants, strode through the doors. Tanya stood stiffly behind the counter, heels still on, a pearl necklace trembling against her throat as she sipped her espresso with the last of her false grace. "This is outrageous," she barked as steel handcuffs locked around her wrists. "You can't just—" "You are under arrest," the lead agent interrupted, "for corporate fraud, interstate trafficking of counterfeit goods, and obstruction of a federal investigation." Victor, pale and sweating, tried to slip out the side exit, but Miguel was waiting, arms folded, gaze steady. "Leaving already," he said, coldly. "I thought you were the face of Zevano." Victor froze. "Sir, I didn't know. Tanya ran everything. She said it was all authorized." Miguel stepped forward, voice like fire beneath ice. "No. You looked a grieving woman in the eye and mocked her. You mocked me. You laughed, not just at her, but at the principles this brand was built on." Victor couldn't speak. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But Miguel said nothing else. This wasn't theater. It was justice. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in El Paso, Miguel made one final call. The number was etched in his mind, not because it was convenient, but because it mattered. "Hello," the voice answered. "Miss Alvarez," he said gently. "This is Miguel Santiago." He paused. Then a soft gasp. "I didn't think you'd actually—" "I'm coming by," he said. "If it's all right, I have something for your father." They met in a modest brick home on the edge of town. No marble, no chandeliers, just warmth. The smell of chamomile and memories. The old man approached slowly, wrist still wearing the broken band of the replica. His voice was quiet but steady. "I wore it even after it snapped," he said, smiling softly. "She saved for months." Miguel didn't reply at first. He reached into a velvet-lined wooden box and brought out a treasure, An original arc-light chrono, one of the first 10 ever made, serial number 009. I made this with my father, Miguel said, his voice thick with memory. 40 hours of handcrafting, calfskin strap, sapphire crystal, precision down to the second, and a heartbeat that I can still feel when I look at it. He placed the watch in the old man's hand and gently closed his fingers around it. This belongs to someone who understands what it's really worth. The daughter wept uncontrollably. Well, she asked through tears, why would you do this? Miguel smiled, tired but proud. Because people like you remind me why I built Zevano. Not for the rich, not for prestige, but for those who still believe in meaning. 1 week later, every Zevano employee across the globe received an unexpected alert, mandatory global broadcast. The screen flickered on. There was no stage, no glamour. Just Miguel. Alone. Standing inside the original workshop in El Paso where it all began. Behind him, pegboards of tools. A battered bench, burn marks and all. My name is Miguel Santiago, he began, voice calm but filled with gravity, and I've come to apologize. Silence. I let this company become a stranger. I trusted the polished, the well-dressed, the clever, and forgot that luxury without integrity is just noise. He held up the fake arc light. This is what greed looks like. He held up the original. This is what love looks like. Then, with one motion, he slammed the fake onto the bench. It shattered. From today forward, he said firmly, every Zevano boutique will carry 2 things behind its counter, my name and my values. You will treat the janitor with the same dignity as the celebrity. You will never judge a buyer by their shoes, their voice, or their credit card. He leaned forward, eyes burning. If you ever humiliate a customer again, if you ever think our brand is more important than the people who believe in it, you're gone. No warnings, no meetings. His voice lowered. And if that scares you, walk away, right now. The feed ended. And the world erupted. Across continents, employees stood, applauded, some cried, some bowed their heads in shame. But everyone knew the old Zevano had died, and something better had been born. Miguel walked out of the frame, but just before he vanished, he glanced once at his wrist. The first arc light, still ticking, because some legacies aren't built in boardrooms. They're built in garages, in whispers, in fire, and in the hands of a man who never forgot what it all used to mean.